everybody, and welcome to this session of Anantha, the poetry festival that is being organized by Samyukta Poetry. And this evening, we have with us in conversation Ramesh with Kashiana Singh. So let me just say a few words about Kashiana Singh first. Kashiana Singh calls herself a work practitioner, and she embodies the essence of her TEDx talks, that is work as worship, into her everyday life. And she has a chapbook called Crushed Anthills from Yavanika Press. It was released in 2020. And she also is the managing editor for Poets Reading the News, and her voice can be heard, and you can read it on various international platforms. She has a new full-length collection, Woman by the Door, and we are proud to be having the India launch of that on Anantha. Now, those are the things that one has to officially speak in the context of being the host of a conversation like this. But apart from all of this, Kashiana Singh is a terrific poet, a very strong voice, an articulate individual who is also a staunch friend. And Kashiana and I, we have never met except through electronic means, but there have been no relations of tangibility or even coffee between us. We live on two different time zones, and yet the kind of bond, the camaraderie, and the assistance that she has lent at various times to help Anantha run the way that it has run is marvelous. I could trust her to come in and contribute in whatever way possible, and without a second thought, I could just ask her, and I know she would do it, no matter what her own difficulties might be. It is very, very rare to find individuals like that, and I think it is on account of the sort of open spirit that we embody that we have such wonderful individuals coming in and becoming such an integral part of Anantha. So Kashiana, I cannot thank you enough for being such a gracious individual. And about this session, as I was telling Kala just before we began officially, that I have my own selfish interests behind this session. Because from the last year onwards, this is the second year of Anantha. The last year onwards, I've been trying to put together a panel on haiku, and finally, I think Shobhana Kumar, who is one of the creative directors of this festival. I told her, look, Shobhana, I don't know anything, but we have to have an in-conversation session with a person, who knows haiku. And then we also have to have a haiku panel, two things. So she said, all right, do you have anybody in mind? And I said, Ramesh. And then there was this small silence. It's like asking for Amitabh Bachchan or something.
Oh, God.
No, seriously, she was like, okay, let me see what I can do. I said, Shobhana, you ask her. You never know till you ask. And then she asked, and here you are. As I wanted to repeat when I say that I wanted you and only you to be a part of, to be the conversation part of the conversation.
Thank you so much.
As bonus, we managed to get Kashiana, and I cannot think of a more synergized, I think, somehow deeply spiritual, in the spirit of haiku kind of conversation than what is going to come about between you two human beings. So without taking much of time, I'm just going to gradually and gracefully withdraw into the background, and I'm leaving it to you people. Please.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia. You know the feelings are mutual, and I would do nothing but not be a friend and a part of Anantha. Thank you, first of all. So let's start there. Thank you to Samyukta Poetry and Anantha for giving us and holding these spaces. I think they are extremely important. Sonia has been instrumental in it, and I know she's going to be angry at me mentioning her name instead of Samyukta Poetry's, but we know the force behind this festival. More power to her and more wishes for this going from strength to strength. Kala, let's jump in. I am so excited, and like the two of us were saying, we are also both nervous.
I'm nervous. Oh, yes, I am.
because we just want this conversation to flow extremely well, which we know it will. I'm nervous for many reasons, and one of the reasons is what Sonia mentioned, right? It's like I'm sitting in front of the Amitabh Bachchan, but that's not the reason I'm nervous. I'm nervous because it's the guru-shishya relationship. I think of you in that way, Kala, as much as you might agree and humbly not agree to it. And it's extremely overwhelming to be sitting here trying to have a conversation with you about your craft, art, work, and life, because your work is also about your life, and we'll jump more into that. So that being said, we talk about a person who knows haiku, and formally, and we'll let the conversation for those who don't know Kala, which I wonder if there's anybody on this in this audience who doesn't. But for those who don't know, it will unfold as we have the discussion in the next 65 minutes or so. But formally speaking, Kala is a teacher, poet, a leader in expanding the role of poetry in India. She has become, as we all know, a worldwide force for Japanese poetry. Award-winning, no doubt, and I won't speak to all the awards, and inspiration to many, like has been mentioned. Today, we'll have a conversation and we'll flow in and out of different places, but we anchor on Kala's book, the latest book, which is called The Forest I Know, and that's focused on Tanka, Tanka Prose, and Tanka Sutra. We'll delve into that and a lot around those forms, but cannot wait for that. So let's hold on that. I must also mention that Kala is the founding editor and director of Triveni, which is the first platform for haiku and Japanese poetry in India, and a lot of us in this audience are part and engage in that. Kala also thrives, and I'm taking the liberty of saying that, Kala, thrives in creating mentorships. The last program, which she formally ran, was called Gurukulam, which again, just the title speaks to the philosophy and the life approach that Kala brings to the table. Kala, thank you. I'm sure I've missed some formal aspects, but we'll let it flow and ensure that comes through in the discussion.
And Kasyana, I should say thanks a lot for agreeing to have this conversation with me. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. Thank you so much.
There's no question. It's my lifetime achievement. It's going to go on my tombstone. Kashiana had a conversation with Kala Ramesh. Let's jump in, and we will jump into the book and talk about that a little bit. But I do want to thank everybody who's on. I can see a lot of people within the Zoom meeting. There's a lot of folks, I'm sure, joining on Facebook. Thank you, everybody, again. This is part of Anantha, and as you know, we've been having many enriching conversations throughout the festival. Kala, the book. It's your latest, and it's a book that's, to me, I have it, as I shared, I have it on my Kindle here, but it's, generally speaking, it's also on my bedside table because it's almost like a prayer book for me now than anything else. And you know, right, sometimes I just pick up in the middle of the page and I'll send you, like, how do you write this? And you wonder, like, where did that come from? Where did that come from? Because the book is sitting right next to me at all points in time. To me, the book is as much about being human, about being tender, about being spiritually inclined, as it is about, of course, the intellectual brevity and expertise in the form. Unique, resonant, as one goes through the various Tanka forms you've incorporated in the collection. And much has been written already, and people have read, I'm sure, about Tanka, but we want to also zoom in on something special, a color special, which is Tanka Sutras. And we'll jump into that in a little bit. But let's jump in first of all. Kala, if you have the book, if you can show it, and speak to us about the title of the book. Where does The Forest I Know come from? What's the genesis of the title? Talk to us a little.
Is the book clear? Is it seen?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I read these lines recently, and I think it's relevant to quote them here. Be like a tree Stay grounded, connect to your roots, bend before you break, and most importantly, keep growing. I think this sort of captures what I've tried to do in this book. It is 14 years of my work, but it is also, I mean, like you people know, or you don't know, but haiku and tanka or haikai poetry is experiential poetry. So the poems that come from the heart. Okay. Now, Michael McClintock, a noted tanka poet, editor, and scholar who wrote the brilliant afterword for this book, suggested the title, The Forest I Know. And my publishers and I loved it. It was, when I signed with HarperCollins, it was signed as a untitled book, because the titles I gave was not really accepted, and which was very sad. But then Michael McClintock gave me The Forest I Know, and I just loved it. The forest on any given day is a place of sunlight or darkness, with shadows shape-shifting and elusive. A space for guarded secrets and hunger that's loud and naked. The more we enter these arboreal living spaces, the more it becomes a metaphor for the mystery of the human psyche. In these pages begin the discoveries of light and dark in nature and in human behavior and relationships. I have themes of disillusionment, betrayal, disappointment, alienation, and non-being, along with the joys of being a woman, discovering life, motherhood, and those wonderful childhood days, all rapidly unfolding through the pages. My father would always say, life is not a bed of roses. To me, this book is special because it's also about the resilience of a woman who has bounced back. Banksy has said beautifully, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. I feel my book does this. In fact, Michael began his afterword with a tanka from which this title was taken. And he insisted that of all the tanka that he read when writing the afterword, this tanka kept coming back to him. And he said, this is what it should be. The tanka goes as, at twilight, the forest I know by sight becomes a forest of sound. Cicada summer. At twilight, the forest I know by sight becomes a forest of sound. Cicada summer. Michael says, for him, these 5 lines express the genesis of this book and the entire arc of its narrative. My sincere thanks to Masood Hussain for lending his painting and HarperCollins art director for the cover design, which complemented the minimalistic approach of Japanese short form poetry. Yes, Kashiana.
Beautiful, thank you. And it's really, I don't know if I'm sure a lot of listening in and kind of listened into Arundhati's conversation with Sonia a couple of days ago.
Yes.
And going back to trees, I don't remember which one of the mystics in her latest book, but she talks about the conversation, right? Sonia and she discussed about just the tree and the tree system and the synchronicity that they have, right? And the difference between the vertical and the horizontal that trees bring to us. So it's all connected, right? It's all the same.
Yes, it is.
It was beautiful for you to hear saying it because she was reading a passage from one of her conversations with one, I think it's the last mystic conversation in the book that she has. So Sonia, I was referring to that. I remember that section really well of the conversation with Arundhati.
Lovely.
Yeah. To I don't want to spend 2 seconds on the space and the cover, right? No question. And we'll jump into that in probably the second section of our discussion. But the emptiness and the space on the cover comes through really clearly, just to re-emphasize what you said about the design of the cover.
Yes, yes.
So before we jump into actually, and I do want to quickly jump into Tanka Sutra without much ado, but before we go there, speak for 2 minutes about the sections of the book, right? You mentioned the arc of the book, but you also have titles and you have the book divided into sections, right? Things like Pellets of Desire. Speak to that.
See, I actually started from the backyard well, which was about my childhood, and then the Pellets of Desire as a teenager. Then within and without, when I'm understanding what life is all about, then Tanka Doha is something that I've been trying because of influence from music, Kabir. And so I have around 13 or 14 Tanka Doha in this, and then oneness. Okay, and Maya was somewhere sandwiched in between. That was my recent years now. But that is the only thing my editor told me. She said, let's start with Maya and then go through your whole life history and then come to oneness, because that sort of completes the whole book so beautifully. I agreed. So we start off with Maya, and Maya is where I think it is a set of poems that happened to me, and then how I did bounce out of it. And so that is what I think many people have told me, that holds the whole poem, the book together, but there are other chapters.
No question. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. And by the way, I'll jump in and share here. Sonia spoke about the synergy of Kala and myself. Well, the synergy went to the extent I'm a grandmother, which I don't miss an opportunity to share that with whoever.
I'm a grandmother too.
And my little boy is named Kabir. So that was very, very interesting when you mentioned Kabir and the inspiration you have, Kala, there.
Yes.
Let's jump to the basics of Tanka Sutra. You created this hybrid form. We really want our listeners to hear from you on how you amalgamated that form, but also the inspiration behind doing that.
Yes, I hate to disappoint you, but I don't think it was my creation at all. Let me go back. My father is a doctor, practicing doctor. He just died 2 years back. And he used to tell us that suture came from the Sanskrit word, sutra. I was not into haiku that time at all, nor was I reading the Buddhist Heart Sutra and all these things. It came later, much later. Even the Hindu philosophy came much later. But this was in my head that suture comes from the Sanskrit word sutra.
Wow.
And sutra means thread. Suture means thread. Okay. Now I go back to 2009 when I was a co-editor along with Sanford Goldstein, who's huge in the Tanka world. And for 3 years, we were editors of Take 5. And so I've been reading a lot about him. He came to 1964, he came to Tanka, and he's the one who started writing up to 10 Tanka every day, even more in times of crisis, a custom he continues even today.
Wow.
And I think he must be 80, 85 or maybe more now. Okay. Now, in 1980, if I'm not mistaken, he worked on a translation of Japanese poetry, Tanka poets, and he came to know that there is a difference between Tanka sequence, and there are two sort of parallel running between Tanka sequence. So to differentiate them, he said one is Tanka thread, the other one is sequence.
Interesting.
Even that is after 40 years, that idea is still not picked up. Now, Tanka sequence, if anyone knows Renku, it is about the link and the shift. That's the most beautiful thing the Japanese has given us, the link and shift. So they follow the link and shift, Tanka sequence. But he says a string has its links tied to a central subject, often the title of the poem. So the narrative is much more close-knit. It's closer, it comes close together. And I thought, and the name Sutra is something that the world knows now because of Zen Buddhism. So I said, why not call it Tanka Sutra? So I'm sorry to disappoint you, Kasyana. It's not my creation. It is just that I've named it that.
In my head, you created it. You helped us learn it. So we'll keep moving forward.
I'd like to read one Tanka Sutra for
I
you.
was going to go there. Yeah.
Now, see the heading, the title, and see how I've spoken about different ways. And in Tanka Sutra, you can come back because it's a thread. In Tanka sequence, you cannot repeat a verse. It's very clear, isn't it? Now, let me say, how women, is time always new? Then what was that river that passed by you yesterday, in which I'm standing now? Was it bondage or a smothering of love, these Chinese lily feet? The trek uphill seemed tougher with its twists and turns. A dreamer like most brides, but widowed soon after, the village cheered as you jumped into your husband's pyre. In your eyes, the darkness of moist earth. It's beyond me to unravel such horizons. I live with the image. Is time always new? I ask, is time always new? Then what was that river that passed by you yesterday in which I'm standing now? Yes, Kasyana.
Yeah, you come back, right?
I come back, yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Of course, the images and the darkness of moist earth, right? The brevity, of course, is always critical, but also how you draw from nature to bring home the point. Not just because Japanese poetry and nature and Kigo and all of that is fine, but it's also how you, and we'll read a couple of others, draw from the daily nature around you. And almost Mary Oliver-like, right, in terms of bringing in nature from and going back to the forest again. Her favorite thing was walking in the forest with a notebook and a pencil in her hand because the trees and the forest and the insects gave inspiration. So I think that comes through as well. But this was a very clear example of Tanka Sutra, and we'll read a few more along the way, but it was something good to get everybody who's listening grounded as well. Let's keep moving, and we should zoom in a little bit on the craft, and then we'll zoom back out again about other parts of the conversation that I want to take this to. But let's zoom into the craft a little bit. You, like I said, you don't stay at the surface when you write, right? You go into real intimate details, whether it's about nature or about life or about the woman who jumped into the pyre or is walking by the river, right?
Yeah.
I almost think of your writing like intricate lace, right? My mother knits and does crochet, and it's almost like a crocheted little thing where there's intricacy in everything you bring to the table, but there's also tightly knotted sections, right? It's not loose lace, it's really tightly knotted together as well. And you weave in and out of those knots, right, to create the lace. So if I speak for a layperson, let's assume nobody's ever heard, and Sonia said at the beginning, she's listening in because she's trying to absorb and learn as well, of haikai poetry, of course, Tanka, or micro writing, if you want to call it that. If you speak from a layman's word, it's really low word count, clear use of breaks, right? Punctuations to maximum effect, the rhythm, music, right, that comes through a bodily experience to be brought back to the page. Those are the things to keep in mind if you don't want to complicate this. Of course, Tanka has a history, and you mentioned that going back maybe 1,000+ years. I also know you can talk about all of this in your sleep, but break this down for a layperson and somebody who's jumping into this form. What are the 2 or 3 things you would say to somebody like that?
Well, see, 2 or 3 things is not right, because you know Japanese art forms.
Yes.
Can you talk about 2 or 3 things when we are doing bonsai or karate or ikebana or judo? No, you can't, because it all comes together, and it is the years that you put in or the effort that you put in as a beginner. Okay, so for that I have a Zen story which I would like to say. I would like to read rather. A Zen master dropped his handkerchief and said to one of his disciples who was just sitting there, "Try to pick up the handkerchief. Try to pick it up," he said. Immediately, the disciple picked up the handkerchief and gave it to the master. But the master was not happy. He dropped it again. And he said, listen to what I'm saying. Try to pick it up. And the disciple again picked it up. It happened 6 times, and the master dropped the handkerchief again and again. When he dropped it the 7th time, it dawned on the disciple what his master might be meaning. He was giving a coin. Try to pick it up. How can you try to pick it up? Either you pick it up or you don't pick it up. How can you try? Then he laughs and says, I understand what you're saying, master. He bows down and thanks the master. The master said, remember, never try. Either do or don't do. There is no way to try. So that is, I think that is what I would like to tell the beginners coming in. It is not a question of just reading a few haiku or a tanka or haibun and then trying to write it, and after 3 days or 4 days saying, oh, it's too tough, it's too rigorous, it's too riddled with the rules, and walking off. Go at it for 3 months, 4 months, and you'll get it. It's not rocket science. We've all done it. There are so many poets winning awards and doing so well amongst the Indians. We're all doing it so well. So it's not difficult. So that is what I would say. Kasyana?
That's a beautiful story, right? It's again, I keep connecting this form of writing and something that keeps me coming. Even if I look away from haiku for a few days or a few weeks, and you know that I come back to it.
Yes.
Very often, not because of the poetics of it, but because of the meditation of it.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I want to mention that the draw or the anchor to haiku for me is just what it does for me and my soul, more than, of course, it's beautiful poetry that comes, of course. And so I want to go there for a second, Kala, because you have spoken very often about Ananda, right? And seeking the joy in writing. And I feel you mentioned, right, it's a little bit of, it's hard work. Everything is hard work, no question. But it's dedication, consistency, focus, like you said, and you'll get the knack of it. But I still do feel that sometimes the barrier to haiku is people getting bogged down by the rules, and so they don't start at all, right? And yet you are someone who lives the ananda of this form. How do we kind of, obviously Ananda is a journey, right? You don't get to Ananda day one, but speak to us about how do you focus on Ananda and not the rules, and then let the rules be something you learn as you're writing, because you'll make mistakes. You may not be perfect. You may not get it right, but if you're doing it for the Ananda of it, it will start to get better, to your point. Does that
I
make
think
sense, Kala?
yes, yes, it makes a lot of sense because I think perfection is a myth. It is doesn't exist at all. I remember when we were growing up, we were taught to do things perfectly. And it was only later and maybe getting into haiku that helped me. Even in music, when I was striving for music, I wanted to get the perfect note, the perfect raga, the rules, you know. Indian music has as many rules as haiku has or more. So trying to get all that, I was bogged down. I used to sing within the four walls. I never used to sing outside. And then I happened to hear the Rajasthani folk singers, clean, bold. There they were with robust voice. Their voice will crack on the top octave, but so much emotion because of that crack, so much of texture that they brought into that voice. And then I said, what am I trying to do with my voice? Trying to polish it, make it smooth without taking away. And then, of course, I was doing Kumar Gandharva's Gaiki, which again is robust and which is coming from the Nabi. So all this sort of helped me when I got into haiku. And then there were rules. And I didn't want to remain closeted within the computers and the room. I started sending my submissions immediately. And that is how you understand that perfection is never possible because every editor sees things through a different eyes. But you have your voice and you like Oscar Wilde says, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. You know, that voice that you have to develop and then that faith that yes, and then you see that nature, luckily for us, haiku is so much of nature, like just now you said, Kashiana, nature helps us to understand that nature is not perfect. It's never perfect. It's not. And then what are we trying to get a perfect haiku there? Like Basho, we call him Master Basho. He has said, write 100 haiku and you'll get one correct. Or you'll get one which you think is a good haiku. If that is the case, then you see so many plants and so many flowers. We never look for perfection in any of the plants. No, then what is this perfection? So I think if you let go of that perfection, wanting to create that perfect haiku, I think it is just the joy, the ananda that you were talking about, and that takes over. Like, let me just recite one scenario. Rewriting a check once again. Rewriting a check once again, my signature goes awry. So there's no perfection. Here I am. I struggle with all the checks. I'm so careful. Even now I'm getting worse and worse because so much of computer work, my signature's gone for a toss.
I'm glad you went there, Kala, with that example, because it's also fun, right? And you say that Ananda, keep Ananda. It's like childlike fun in writing, like this check scenario that you said, right?
Yes.
So just to your point, letting go and let the experience come to the page as you're writing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I am going to take the liberty of reading one because you mentioned music. I'm not part of it, but this is one of my favorites, and I might get it wrong because I'm going to read. It's something that goes like this: cascading notes, my breath holds, even the song silence. Something, did I get that right, Kala?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's about the music and how you incorporate the navrasas and music right into your academic teaching as well. Whenever you talk to us about haiku writing, you bring those examples, but you also incorporate it into your own writing as well. Yeah. I'm going to, if I have your permission, I'm going to read one from the book.
Of course.
And then a little bit. I want to read oneness. Okay. And I'm nervous. If my voice shakes for everybody who's listening, that's because I can't dare to read Kala's writing. Oneness, and the preface is for Ustad Bismillah Khan. His breath through a Shehnai shapes the raga. On night's inverted stage, the stars keep beat. On night's inverted stage, the stars keep beat. It moves on, stepping beyond what has no beyond. In my mind, that flower lives forever, I know not where.
Yes.
That flower lives forever, I know not where. I'm going to do a couple, I'll skip. On Rang Panchami, fisher folk throw colors on one another. The moon emerges with indigo stains. The moon emerges with indigo stains. How do you do that again, right? Like the moon emerges with indigo stains. Like it's just beautiful. And Kala, let's pause there because you always say, and I would love for them to hear it from you, because this one in particular says, oh, I can actually paint this, right? So speak for 2 minutes about your concept and the conversation you had with the painter, I think, wasn't that in Kashmir or somewhere?
Yes, yes, yes. See, teaching I've been doing for the last, say, I just came in 2005, and 2006 January, I had my first group of people. They were all adults at the Katha Utsav. Computers, I didn't know how to put because a haiku sits so beautifully in a PPT presentation, and it's so nice to discuss a poem when you just go through the poems. I didn't have that. So a paper, and then went around showing it to everybody, and I came back. And that is when I started. And that led me to be a writer, full-fledged. I even gave up my music because my music was not going anywhere at all. And I said, why not? And then, for me, luckily for me, I had taken classical music, which is spiritual, and also coming into Kumar Gandharva, which is again a very, very robust style, but a very, very pure style. There's no frills and fancies and nothing like that. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then this writing of haikai, tanka also, and haibun is minimalistic. It is, what to say, it holds the truth because it's experiential poems. So Fugo no Mokoto is about truth, sincerity of words. And when that comes in, teaching gets slightly easier. You know, because we have a concept, we have a package that we can teach. It is not all over the place. And then what the poet does with it is left to them. Like everything, we take I always say, we take the horse to the river, but we can't make the horse drink. Ultimately, what the person takes is their own effort and what to say, to stick on to something, wanting to do it. Yes, persistence. Right. And now I remember one more story. In 2005, in fact, in 2005 autumn, Katha again called me to teach Sarvodaya students, 5th standard. They're just 10 years old, okay? And in Hindi, my Hindi is bad. And I hardly knew how to teach haiku, that too in Hindi. And the teachers just left the classroom because for them it was a free period. And here I was stuck with nearly 52 Sarvodaya children staring at me with all great excitement because it was a special workshop for them. And I didn't know how to teach them. I didn't even know how to tell them what is an abstract word and a concrete word. I was fumbling. That was 5th A. And I knew I was a complete failure, and I could see that they hardly understood what I was trying to tell them. So I went out and I got printouts of just 2 poems. And I came and showed it for 5th B. After 20 minutes break, I had the 5th B. I showed them the printout and I said, can you draw this haiku? Mm-hmm. Okay. Every child drew I try to get to create excitement in the classroom, and that is what I do in all my workshops. I don't make it dull at all, even for a minute. So I went through and I clapped for one child. I made the child show the poem. I made the other child go and pin up on the notice board. I read one drawing. I explained one drawing. Okay. And then I told them, if you can't draw a haiku, it is not haiku. Okay. And then I got a doubt. I said, that is a new rule that I'm putting. We already have enough and more rules in haiku. How can I say now, if you don't draw, if you can't draw a haiku, it is not a haiku. Just meaning to say that when you talk about tears, what you talk about is, when you talk about unhappiness, what you talk about is the tears. Your reader or your person who's seeing you, if you're weeping, they know that you're sad. You don't have to say, I'm sad. And that is what the children were doing. They were putting abstract words like sorrow, nature, because I said haikus are nature poetry. They said nature is lovely, all adjectives and things like that. So to say that haiku has no adjective, we follow the same thing in tanka also, very minimum of adjectives. Imagine a poetry without adjectives. And then I have a very good friend, Bill Kenny. He once said, which just stuck to my head. He said, when your verb is weak, you need an adjective.
Great point.
Yeah. So it is over the years that I've accumulated all these things, and I don't keep. And I go to Iyengar's yoga. I mean, now I don't, but now I've again started. It's all I'm not a yoga specialist at all, or a performer, but each yoga teacher at Iyengar's Institute, they give their all. Every time I say, if ever I teach, that is the way I should teach. Give everything I know. So something I've understood. And I think it is of Kasyana, you know how many are doing so well in the haiku world.
Yep, no question. To your point about verb adjective, I don't know who it was, I'm sure you will, but I read somewhere a very well said example of what you just described was, if you're pointing to the moon, if your hand is pointing to the moon and your hand is embellished with bangles and beauty, then how will somebody look at the moon? Because your hand is going to come in the way of looking at the moon. So
absolutely.
Point about verbs and adjectives.
Absolutely. Now look at Roken. Roken was a Buddhist monk. He says, he comes into the room and he feels, he's seen that the theft has taken everything and gone. And he's already a monk. He's hardly has anything at all. And Roken says, I wish the thief had stayed back. I would have given my robes also to him. And then he looks out of the window and he writes this poem. The thief left it behind, the moon at the window.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Lipo, how do you teach these things to students? They have to understand that it's something much more. Like Basho said, if you talk about the pine, become the pine. How is that possible? Everybody quotes these things in essays, but is it possible? But look at Lipo, who has said, we sit together, the mountain and I. We sit together, the mountain and I, until only the mountain remains.
Yeah. So that until only the mountain remains. And to everybody who's watching and listening, we'll take questions in a few minutes as well. So throw them in the chat or keep them ready. I'm sure you have questions. But that point about mountains and until the mountain remains is how I described is the process of reduction, right?
Absolutely.
Like, how do you keep peeling the layers of the onion till you get to the kernel of what you want to say? And I want to say that because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are non-haiku, but they're writers. Of course, they are poets.
Which will help them.
Yes, and this is what haiku has done to me in my poetry, generally as well, is every time I look at the page, I want to peel away the unnecessary layers of the onion that come through in the first draft or the second draft. So haiku has, introduction to haiku color has helped me as an editor as well, both to edit my own work, but also in my role as an editor. But
absolutely, absolutely, yes. See, when I gave my first concert, Hindustani classical of Kumar Gandharva's Gayaki in 2000 in Pune, a very good musicologist gave me a review. I've been repeating this because I want this to spread. Okay, and it was a good review, and he also mentioned something as emotional austerity. So the next day I called him. I said, Dattaji, do you think I can come over to your place? I want to understand what is emotional austerity. He said, come over. It was in the other part of the city. I drove there and we were talking, and then I said, emotional austerity, what did you mean by that? I know emotional, I know austerity, but both coming together, what is it? So he said, have you seen people, musicians, good musicians sing a bhajan? They put ornamentation, they put decorated with tans and with murkis and sargams and everything possible. They decorate it, they make it special, they make it spellbounding. Okay, and you sit up and you say, yes, but where are the words? It's gone. But he says, look at Kumar Gandharva, and that is what you sang yesterday in your concert, Kumarji's Nirguni Bhajans. Kumarji just had the bare words of Kabir or Gorakhnath, just the bare words. It was almost like Kabir was talking to you. And that is emotional austerity, because he had just sung the whole concert. We know his capacity to hold a raga for one, to expand or delineate a raga for 1 hour. And here he is giving up that ego. He doesn't want to show off, not show off maybe that restrained feeling, that the austerity, the emotional austerity. He doesn't want to dramatize the bhajan. He just wants to give it. And then I said, this haiku needs this. And that is what we are doing in haiku. We are peeling away layers, taking away all that is unwanted. It is emotional austerity. We are not putting emotion into the haiku. It is the reader who puts the emotion into the haiku. And then he says, or she says, it's beautiful.
And I'm going to request you to read, you know which one, but wait for that for a second.
Okay. Do we have time? Do we have time?
Yes, we do. And just to stay on your example of Kumarji's singing, he was creating the silence, right, for the listener. So even though music is all about vocality, but he's creating silent spaces within the notes.
But you know why he created those silences? Yeah, because at the age of 24, when he was doing so well, he even got the title of Kumar Gandharva at the age of 13. At the age of 24, he discovered that he couldn't sing and his lungs were affected. When he went to the doctor, they said it is tuberculosis. And talking about so many years back when streptomycin was not discovered. So they said they had to just remove the right lung, and the left lung, whatever could be saved, they said, you cannot stay in Bombay, you need a dry place. So he chose Devas. And then they said, for 5 years, you can't open your mouth. Okay. And a beautiful story is, he had a Nair cook, and the Nair cook came and said, Kumarji, did I hear you hum? So he keeps quiet. He has a book, and every time he'll write whatever he wants to. He rang the bell and he called him the next day. And he said, look at that sparrow. The sparrow is chirping. How loud that chirp is. What a tiny lung he has. I have a bigger lung than that. I should be able to sing. 5 years later, a musicologist in Pune tells me he shocked the music world with his vigor and vitality, but they were not the sustained notes that you could see from Bhimsen Joshi or Pandit Jasraj. They were short gaps, bursts of energy, because that is what his lung could hold. And it came from the nabi, from the stomach. And now everyone singing Nirguni bhajans or Kambir bhajans, even the youngsters, the pop, everyone is imitating his way of singing because it's effective. So silences, I think, tells more than the music.
That's beautiful. Of course. Talat Tumri. Can we have?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And that just for everybody who's listening, Tumri is from the forest, I know, and it's one of my favorites. The interesting thing was, Bella and I were exchanging notes, and I said, I have a request, and if you would please include Tumri, but you want, she said, I already have that. That was my choice too. So
it's amazing. It's like telepathy, Kashiana. Okay, I start. Tumri. I enter her room. She's singing with her eyes closed. I've heard her, can recognize that voice even in deep sleep. Her ability to fuse meaningful shades to every song, be it a Tumri, a Dadra, a Kajri, or a Bhajan. Abhinaya in those vocal chords. A Bala Saraswati, a Kalanidhi in a different mode. A Pukar here, a Tasir there. All laced with resonance. How effortless it seems. It seems. I soon realized that beneath the simplicity of a Gayaki lies her deep respect for that perfect swara. In Sanskrit, swa means self and ra means light or to bring forth. Meaning, when the musician touches her soul, we say the music is felt. And when that happens, the song with its distilled emotion is there for all to experience. Without doubt, a long journey. One pleasant April evening, I go to the singer to ask if she would teach me. The next day, I begin my lessons. I take some apples with me. She picks one and says with a smile, a slender stalk, but what a huge fruit, like a slender throat and a big voice. The tabla player begins a simple tintal. She comes alive. Her limbs move, her body sways, her eyes dance, her music weaves through the tal, joining the beat now, going off beat again, teasing just like the Ganga playing hide and seek with the Himalayas. And now she is no more. The night, all to myself. The night, all to myself. I imagine the unseen arc of the crescent moon. The night, all to myself, I imagine the unseen arc of the crescent moon.
Wow, that's just stunning, beautiful.
Thank you.
The abhinaya, the vocal chords, and it's just beautiful, really, really beautiful. It gives me goosebumps every time I read it. But
and if anyone knows Bharatanatyam, we grew up in Chennai. It is Bala Saraswati and Kalanidhi later who taught Abhinaya for students. They were supposed to be excellent exponents of Abhinaya. And that is in voice. To bring that Abhinaya in the voice is something beautiful.
Beautiful. I want to make sure we talk about your role as a community builder. And it's a very critical role, as critical or probably more critical than your role as an individual teacher in the limitation of classrooms, right? You build conversations like these. You build communities. You've done festivals to start communities for haiku. Of course, there's the Haiku Walls program that you initiated. Your role as a guru is also, in my mind, and I'm sure everybody will agree, you serve as an international ambassador for all of us.
Thank you.
And so your contribution to this form is specific, it's precise, of course, because of course, right, what you write about and what kind of a form are you trained in, you will be precise. But the word that comes to my mind is also extremely faithful. And also, for those who've listened to the last few minutes, an hour or so, also childlike in your sincerity and your curiosity. So that being said, the question for you, Kala, is A, simple, why? Why do you do this? B, has at any point in time one role become so overwhelmingly occupying your life or your days or your hours that the other role, even for example, your own role of writing your own poetry, takes the sidelines? Share some of that with us.
One's writing does suffer when you're too much into teaching and promoting an art form, but it's full-time job for me. I just love what I'm doing, and it is 24 hours. So I find space. But like when we do say you do sambar or you do rasam, can we say one ingredient is more? Then it's not rasam. Everything should be the imli, the salt, the rasam powder, the tomatoes, everything, the hing, and then the coriander leaves and the curry leaves, everything should be in its, and the consistency of the liquid, everything comes together, it's rasam. So writing, teaching, and then expanding it to the rest of the world, what India is doing, is all part of one. I mean, I wouldn't say that one clashes with the other, but this time, many times now, when I go for these conferences, I mean, I should say that American conferences and the British Haiku Society and the American Haiku Society, they've been so encouraging, and they even comment. And this time in 2019, I think, Susan looked at me, Susan Antolich, very good editor. She looked at me and she said, India is doing so well now.
We can hear that.
What a beautiful feeling I got. It's so nice to someone to pick up India and say, hey, your poets are doing well. It's lovely.
Yeah, I expected nothing but that answer, but I still wanted to ask the question. And I think it is, and I've served many, many years in the corporate world, and there's the famous approach of work-life balance. And I've always maintained it's all about work-life integration. There is nothing called work-life balance, or no need for it if you approach your work as worship, and you approach your living every day with this work as worship, which is what comes to the fore. I'm going to pause here and make sure we take any questions. Kala, I wish if we still continue, and if you're okay to stay on for a little bit, I wanted to read, or you to read, or myself, whichever.
Yeah, please read.
This woman thing as one of the, because it's very different from everything you've read.
You mean
so far.
that Haibun?
Yes.
I mean that Tanka prose.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
But before if you can find that, I have it.
Yes,
if
I
you
found
don't
it.
find I have
found
here.
it.
Perfect.
I found it.
Let's pause and see if there are any questions. I want to make sure we give the audience a chance to give us questions. I'm looking at the chat, but otherwise, everybody who's on, feel free to unmute yourself and put forth your question to Kala if you have any. Okay, while people are thinking, I have a question here in the chat from Kabir. Here, Kabir.
Oh, hi, Kabir. Lovely to see you.
And his question is, I'm going to read it. Its question is, if someone is very regular in writing a different form of poetry to explain a situation or an emotion, what should that person or poet do to process haiku from within? And do we need to just lean into the traditional legacy of Basho, or are there changes? It's a long, the second part can be a long answer, because there's a lot there. I think the first part we've kind of covered it through our conversation, but do you want to just zoom in for a minute again, Kala?
Yes, I think I told you the Zen story of how there's no trying. You have to not just, you shouldn't give up. So when you do the haiku, and in case the editors, rejection is something we are famous. We can take rejections left, right, center, because every time we send our poems, if one is accepted, 4 are rejected. So then you look at the poem and you say, why is it? Then you read up. Basho, yes, it's 400 years old, but things have not changed. We keep saying haiku has changed its face, but once you come in, you know that there is a group of haiku poets who stick on to the traditional. I'm not talking about 575 at all here. 575 is something different. I'm talking about contemporary modern haiku, which good magazines take. And then you have the modern magazines like which they call the coup. Coup means verse. And you have that. Then you just know that certain poems, when you write, you know that this should go to Bones, this should go to Sonic Boom, this should go to the Heron's Nest. You just come to know. But the process of writing is not something that comes automatically, especially if you're writing free verse. Because in free verse, it's a different type. Here, like I told you, how do you teach oneness with your object, which you don't have to do in free verse? Maybe I don't know free verse, so I'm not even putting it down or anything. Please don't even take it that way. But to write like the pine, become the pine. That is what we are all trying to do. Like Lipo's poem, me and the mountain kept looking until only the mountain remains. How do you teach that? That is spiritual. It's not religion. It's not Zen. It is not anything. It's not nothing. It's spiritual. That oneness of thought, that it's non-dualism. So yes, haiku, tanka, haibun, teaches us these things, and it's not that easy, Kabir. But taking a workshop, which we didn't have when we came, we struggled through it alone. But taking a workshop will help, definitely will help.
Thank you, Kala. A follow-on question to that from Mandakini. Mandakini, thanks for joining. It's similar, but I think it's simpler in that. Okay, so that being said, is there a form you would recommend as the starting entry into haikai poetry?
It's haiku. It's haiku. It's not even tanka. Even tanka is 1,300 years old and haiku is 400 years old. But haiku is what, if you understand, then in tanka we say use the same aesthetic rules or ways of writing that you have used in haiku already. Haibun, again, we call it haikai prose. Nowadays, they don't use that term haikai prose. When I came in 2005, everyone said haiku uses haikai prose, which means not flowery language, which means a simple language the way the haiku is. So I think it is haiku that you come into.
Thanks for asking, Mandakini, and for being here.
Thank you so much. I've also trained with BKS Iyengar, so I really appreciated that. And just to give you some, local color, I was listening to your wonderful presentation on the Viennese tram all the way here. So, and I was like physically not present there. I was like,
oh, thank you.
Actually, with you.
Yeah, I live in Pune. I used to walk up to Iyengar's. Even now, 22 minutes it takes me to walk up and walk back. But now I'm in Chennai and I do it online.
Wonderful.
So maybe we're still waiting for questions. Before we wrap, why don't you read this woman thing? It's not, it may not have, it's a tanka prose, right, Kala, but it's a good example of just what we spoke about in terms of haiku writing and incorporating haiku into the haiku.
This woman thing, being the third daughter, I was still ignorant about menstruation. Not surprising in that age and time. I remember that day. It was our summer vacation and I had just turned 12. My sisters and I were playing a game of carom. A sudden spurt of warm feeling. A sudden spurt of warm feeling. My blood from a womb I knew nothing about. A sudden spurt of warm feeling. My blood from a womb I knew nothing about. My mother said we'll keep it a secret from the older members of our family, or else I'll be forced to wear a half sari to hide from the world my becoming a woman.
Beautiful. It's so beautiful. This was Satumri was my favorite. This is another one of my favorites. And I especially went there. We could have gone in many different places, Kala, from the book. Every single one of them is a gem. Is for folks who are listening in, Mandakini, Kabir, and the questions, right? A, the form, but B, the themes and the voice brings forth exactly and probably all the same things that anybody else would want to through other forms of poetry, right? So this is sharply feminist, right? If you want to call the word feminist, and I'm doing that with hesitation, as the haibun that you just read, but it's also extremely innocent in the way it's written. So thank you for reading.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can start to, I want to hang on to this place and space, and I'm sure Samyukta wouldn't mind, but we want to be respectful of everybody who's dialed in. The conversation will be available on Facebook to listen in the future for anybody who could not join. Any other questions from anybody who's on?
There's a question from Mandakini.
Yes, I'd already said it, Mandakini. I talked about emotional austerity.
Ma'am, but I wanted to ask you about memorability. You know, when you said, if I may just substantiate the question.
Yes,
you know,
please.
I feel like
I didn't read it. Kasyana, can you just read that question?
It was about brevity as a let's say prerequisite for memorability. I feel great poems are memorable. They become like mantras, right? And you will remember them, like you know, the moon at the window. You know, thieves left that behind. You will never forget that.
Yes,
right?
haiku comes with so many different teachings. You know, so here I start my Simbi undergrads course with something called Ma. It is M-A, it's pronounced as M-A-H, Ma, M-A-A-H, Ma. Okay, I tell the students to form a huge circle, put the desk against the wall, and then you formed a circle, and I'm here, and then I say whatever comes in, it reverberates in that space. Okay. So many people mistook and said, we have to form a circle and then that is Ma. I said, no, that is not Ma. That is just to explain what Ma can be. But Ma means the uncluttered. Ma means being free of, say, cluttering up things, putting too many things. And then it goes on to say that when you enter a room with a lot of things, you know, the carpets, the Persian carpets, the wallpapers, the paintings, the chandeliers, everything. You say, wow, but you don't remember anything in particular.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. They say, supposing it's an empty room, there's just one table there, and then a vase, and maybe a rose drooping. He says, till you die, you remember the shape of that stalk and the way the rose was drooping. You don't need brilliance. You don't need beauty. Even in there's beauty. So it's how you look at it. And that is called Ma. And and that is also called the white spaces. In Renku, we call it, see, everything comes together. As you keep on dabbling into it, everything comes together. And John Carnley called it, he was an expert in Renku, which is collaborative poetry. He called it a white space. And that white space is the unsaid. Leave things unsaid. If you learn how to leave things unsaid, and haiku is completely about leaving things unsaid. You know, there's a very small example which I give my undergrads, or when I take a workshop, I say the first line is not very good. Daybreak, the eagle takes off. That is unsaid. That is left incomplete. To leave a poem incomplete for the reader to fill in is what makes it memorable. Because you have put in your work into it, and you say that poem, you'll always remember. But what is filling the space? Daybreak, the eagle takes off into the sky. I have killed it. I have killed it.
Yes. Yeah.
There's nothing. Okay. I have to just watch it, watch this poem like I'm watching a TV program.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing for my imagination to put in. So we call something called the semicircle of a haiku. We don't complete the haiku, even though the Japanese are famous for their enzo. The enzo is an incomplete circle when it comes to haiku. And we follow that in tanka and in haibun, in everything, in haikai poetry, so that you leave that space for the reader to step in. That makes it memorable. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question.
Much. Wonderful. Thank you.
Kala, I think this discussion requires to read this little one from Oneness that I left out, and it says, why try to fill gaps with anything at all? Won't silence do as well?
Yes, yes.
Why try to fill gaps with anything at all? Won't silence do as well?
Absolutely.
And I think that's an appropriate place to wrap the conversation. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Kala, thank you for being an embodiment of the meditative and healing power of poetry, of teaching, and community.
Thank you. Kasyana, you did it so well. I was nervous in the beginning. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but you have an easy way. Like Sonia had said, she said it's going to be a beautiful conversation between two people. And I think you did it so well. You're a master at it. Thanks, Sonia.
Take care of yourself. Take care, everybody. And thank you, Samyukta, again, for holding the space. We have more of Anantha coming, so tune in and listen.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Take care.
One second. There's a request from Kabir Dev asking if you can read the spine from your book.
I missed that. Yeah. Why not?
Oh, that's about my mother. Let me see if I can find it. The woman thing I just found immediately.
And meanwhile, Mandakini remarks that it has been wonderful and thank you for sharing with us. And she thanks Kasyana for her gentle and perceptive moderation. And on Facebook, Gopal Lahiri says, that's true, poems do come from the heart. And Malaki Edwin Vedamani, who's appearing later on Anantha, says, hello, Kala. Sanjay says, hi. And Gopal Lahiri also comments, wonderful start. That was
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia, for having it. I've found spine. Can I read it?
Yes, please.
The spine. I held mother's hand, gently guiding her across the road with its fast-moving traffic. My father and I were taking her to see a doctor for her severe back pain. Her touch was very fragile as she held my hand. So automatically, my hold on her tightened. We are foreborn by her, and all of us have greatly admired her strength and fortitude in the face of adversities. She was never the one to flinch. She was never the one to flinch. But on that day, she had tried to get out of the car. Her face crumbled for a second, and it was painful to see her go through all this. It's now 2 years since her lower back pain episodes stopped. She is over it, or rather, she proudly says, I know how to tolerate pain. Of course, none of us believe her. Stopped by the traffic signal. Stopped by the traffic signal, a woman. The myriad expressions we carry through life. Stopped by the traffic signal, a woman. The myriad expressions we carry through life. I didn't read it well. I fumbled in 2-3 pages, but yes, sorry, Kabir.
Beautiful poem, and thank you, Kabir, for requesting for that.
And thanks, Sonia. I really enjoyed. Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this wonderful evening. And I thank the audience also for their participation, for their sustained interest. And, as you both were talking, I realized that in order to practice any of these art forms that you have mentioned, what one essentially needs in their character is something called, what is called in Hindi as tehrav, a sense of rootedness and assurance.
Yes.
Which is very important, because it requires patience. It's not the kind of patience that says, okay, I'll take 3 deep breaths. It's not that kind. This is a sort of patience that requires that you know you've got it when you can see time walk by very slowly. It's the art of being able to pick up the rainbow from the raindrop.
Lovely.
So at least,
and every time you write a poem, a tanka or a haibun or a haiku, after certain years it's come out well. Okay, you know that you have not compromised. You know that what you wanted to see, you saw a mountain and you saw the sun reflected on the rocks, and you've captured it well. It is not fiction. It is a moment experience. And that is what is so powerful, because others have experienced that moment. And you can relate to it so beautifully, if it's well done. The minute you put dishonest or untruth words in it, you make it flashy, you make it ornamental, you make it flowery, it doesn't work, whether it's a haibun or haiku. There are some people who are saying, wow, it's a beautiful haibun, I could never write like this. But again, remember, we are showing our capacity to write. Here, it is called the wordless poem. The words drop away. Like when I go for a workshop, I tell them, can you think like a 6-year-old? Can you have words which only a 6-year-old can understand? But the words, the 6-year-old can read maybe, but not understand the depth. As an adult, you understand the depth of that simple words. The words are so simple. It's called the wordless poem. I think why it's called is because the words just drop away, and all that strikes you is an image, and you don't forget it.
Great point.
Oh, I can keep on going on. I can keep on going about this.
This panel, which has friends, which has such kindness, which has run on, the goodness of heart of strangers by the definition of what, strangers go in these days. I would say this is our haiku that we have created this evening here.
Yes.
In the friends.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. That's a huge compliment.
And I know it is good because the minute it is almost getting over, I know it is good. So I've already learned. Step
yes. But thanks, Sonia. You're doing wonders here with some Yukta poetry. Thank you. And I want to be involved.
Yes, sure. In the future.
I'll do whatever it is from my part. I would love to. I would like to echo and shadow Kasyana.
Mandakini, Shivakami ma'am, they're all very integral part of this.
Yes, and thanks Shivakami for coming and staying till the end. Thank you so much.
Wild horses could not have kept me awake.
Wild horses would not have kept it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. No, it is, I'm telling you, when everyone says you've been teaching for 17 years, you've been having so many students, I say it's the power of haiku, that little poem that lends itself, yields itself to so many ways of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk for, I take a 60-hour program for Simpis. What do I talk for 60 hours? I make them write a lot and things like that, but it lends itself, I'm telling you. Books and books have been written, such beautiful books on haiku. And then you read the poetry. Then you go back, you understand. It's like I always tell, no art can be, no artist or no poet can be bigger than the poem they're writing. No artist is bigger than the artwork that they're producing. Art is much, much bigger. All we can do is to strive till the end, to reach somewhere, some understanding.
So on that note, I had to ask, will you sing so that we can conclude?
I've not been singing for ages.
Amitabh Bachchan stay and
okay.
also serve
I'll just sing one small Nirguni bhajan, just one small line. I don't even have the Shruti box, nothing. I'm just going to sing it because it was a surprise from you.
One more thing. And the minute you say namaste, I will end the meeting. We will not say goodbye. Okay?
Yes. Jeeni, jeeni, jeeni. Jeeni, 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 jeeni. Pini chadriya. Jeeni, jeeni, jeeni. Jeeni, jeeni, jeeni. Pini chadriya. Jeeni, jeeni. Jeeni, jeeni, jeeni.